pay-per-lead marketing for real estate investors. We're talking about what you need to know, who it's for, how not to waste your money, and how to do this right. Supplement your lead generation fast so you can get leads now. I've got Andy Kolodgie, Mr. Andy Kolodgie with propertyleads.com. Welcome to the show, man.
What's up, man? How are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Let's dive into the nitty-gritty of pay-per-leads. Tell me, give me your best sales pitch for why PPL, and then who's it for or who's it not for?
Well, it's the same sales pitch that Carrot uses, right? Carrot says, "Hey, don't." Brady, you still there?
I'm still
just
here,
me now.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. All right, make sure you didn't disappear on me, man.
Yeah.
And it's the same sales pitch that Carrot uses, where they're saying like, "Hey, don't become a web developer. Like, use a Carrot site and focus on being a real estate investor." Well, it's the same thing for us. Hey, don't focus on the marketing. Focus on being a real estate investor and closing deals and creating cash and stuff like that. The marketing is just a bunch of technical stuff at the end of the day. And so we try to take all the marketing technical stuff, kind of bottle it up, box it up. You pay per lead. You get a refund guarantee in the back end to make sure that you're not getting a crappy product at the end of the day. And you just walk out the door with your deals and stuff. That's the hot sales pitch if I were to have one.
If you were to have one, I love that. We were talking before we went live on the podcast, and it's like when you're building a business, you can only focus on so many things at once, and so at one time. And so we recommend, like when we talk about marketing, start with this one marketing method, get really good at it, nail it down, and then start to scale it or add on another one. Don't try and do 3 or 4 things at once. Don't try to do social, SEO, PPC. Don't try to do it all at once because you're going to do mediocre at best for all of them. Yeah, so I love that. Who's it for? Who's PPL a good fit for?
It's a good fit for a couple different people. And I think to touch on what you're saying there as well, when you first start getting into real estate investing, you're doing 3 different things at once. You're doing sales, you're doing marketing, trying to figure out how to run a business. And so if you take one of those things off your plate, specifically the marketing piece, which is probably the most technical piece of it all, it lets you focus on just one, at maximum 2 things, which is really just the sales and the actual running of the business. So PPL right off the rip is a great fit for somebody who's just getting into real estate. They're just getting started. They've got some cash. They're not just cold calling, and they're ready to invest in their business and stuff. And they're ready. They want to start building that machine. Kind of, we call it a hamster wheel in the Carrot community, but build that hamster wheel so you can print some cash. So you can go actually focus on evergreen marketing stuff as well. And that doesn't mean that you stop and you turn off PPL when you're done, because at some point, once you know your return on ad spend with PPL, why would you give that up? Why would you just turn off the faucet kind of thing? So right. I think it's a good fit for the beginner and stuff. We have a ton of people who are super experienced as well, super advanced people spending 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 grand a month. But those are also enterprise type clients as well, where they have huge sales teams. They're just trying to get as many leads through their system as possible. And they like the flexibility to be able to turn off and on their marketing at 9 a.m. and at 5 p.m. so that they don't have to deal with the leads that come in overnight. So PPL is really nice because it allows you a lot of flexibility. It's not like a direct mail campaign where you got to shell out 10, 20 grand, hope for the best or whatever. You get some level of certainty when you're doing PPL.
It is lower commitment. It's much lower commitment, lower risk. It's more of on demand. I can turn on the faucet. I can turn on the faucet, and then I can turn off the faucet.
For sure.
And if something comes out the faucet that I don't like, if it's rusty water, I can send it back up the faucet.
Yes.
Get my money back.
Yeah, and speaking of that too, I mean, that's something you can't do with, let's say, Google, right? Like, you get a bad click on Google, it's another wholesaler or something like that in your market, and you spend $100 in that click, you can't refund that to Google. At least I don't know anybody who's been able to figure out how to refund that to Google. And if you can figure that out, let me know, because I could save a lot of money doing that.
That'd be great.
But with the leads,
refund Facebook, yeah.
For sure. But on the lead side, we have to sell something that's legitimate, right? And if we just start sending out wholesalers and stuff, that's just a bunch of garbage. So we're of course always going to allow you to refund wholesale leads, MLS, mobile homes and parks and rented land, that kind of stuff. Stuff that it's not really in the scope of what we do.
Okay, nice, man. That makes sense. I want to talk about, for the people listening, I want to talk about kind of what's working best. A few kind of ninja tips for PPL buyers. That's kind of what we'll focus the meat of this episode on. By the way, if you're listening to this podcast after the fact, we do a live Q&A every week, which is not included in the podcast feed. So if you're just listening to the podcast, feel free to join us on YouTube or Facebook, community.carrot.com. That'll take you to the Evergreen Marketing Facebook group, and we'll answer your questions live in real time. So we'll cover the meat of it, and then afterwards we'll do a little Q&A. But One thing, Andy, before we get into the meat of it on like what's some of those tips for if you're spending money on paper leads, tell me about some of the things you should look out for when you're vetting paper lead companies.
When the things that I would look out for, the first thing I would look out for is like, do they refund you for people who don't pick up the phone or don't respond to a text or don't respond to an email? Because at
Yeah.
some point, like if you really think about it, a PPL company's incentives are not aligned with yours. If they could just jam through a list, they don't have to expect them to pick up the phone and you get billed $300 per lead. I mean, that just doesn't seem fair to me at all.
Mm.
And so that's something we focused on a lot. If you get a lead from us, or if you get a lead from another PPO company that I think is a really good PPO company, you can't get on the phone with them in some form or another after a certain period of time. I don't think that's a lead. That lead should get refunded. That's something that I look for. Something else I look for is a longer refund policy. Yeah, I feel like it's a little bit curt to say, hey, you only got 24 hours, you only got 48 hours to get your refunds in. What happens if you get a lead at Friday night at 10 p.m.? Now you got to refund it by Sunday, but maybe you don't work the weekends. Maybe you gotta wait till Monday. And all of a sudden you're out another $200 or whatever. So those are some of the things that I look at. I think the other big thing too, and this is kind of a changing system that we're starting to see, is some PPO companies, they'll limit the amount of refunds you can do. They say, hey, refund bad leads and stuff, but then they'll say, but don't refund more than like 20 or 30% of your leads. Otherwise you're out of the system. To me, that's a bit disingenuous because it's kind of it's a bit hypocritical. It's saying like, hey, do this, but don't do it too much, Or they'll say, hey, if you refund leads, you can refund as many leads as you want, but the more leads you refund, the less leads we're going to send you. It's kind of two sides of the same coin.
Okay,
if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, that does make sense. One of the other things you kind of touched on this in the beginning, but follow up. A lot of these leads are really motivated. They're hotter leads. You guys, if you focus on quality, what kind of follow-up system, is there anyone who it would not be a good fit for? Like what kind of follow-up systems do you need in place? Do you got to be a killer closer, et cetera?
For sure. I mean, at the core of it, PPL is a good fit for anybody in real estate who has cash to be able to put forward and put forward some marketing dollars and stuff. But you do have to be able to follow up. Ideally, you have a CRM. Ideally, you have some automated drips as well. What we typically see work best for people on the follow-up side is they're triple dialing on the first phone call. They're triple dialing every single day that they can try to get in contact with the person. They've got them in a text drip. They've got them in an email drip. There's a ton of people out there who have amazing drips out there right now that are getting really, really high conversions and stuff. And then what we really like to see is that even if we refund that lead because they don't get a response with you for whatever reason, that you still continue to drift them out for 3, 6, 9, 10, 12 months. Because what we've seen on our side is that of the leads that we refund, 30% of them transfer title within 6 months, which is hilarious. It means we're refunding leads that people either didn't follow up with, didn't get in contact with, or whatever. So that's what I would do. And that's what I've seen work really, really well for people.
That's interesting, man. That's really interesting. So you got to have a good follow-up in place. You got to be able to close them. We could talk about some of the lower risk with paper lead in general. Let's talk about what's working. Any tips for how to get leads cheaper through paper lead?
For sure. Yeah. The big thing that's working right now to get cheaper PPL leads is to buy leads at night and on the weekends. We've got a lot of these really big buyers right now, and they soak up everything during the week from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Whatever their respective time zone is. And they don't work weekends and they don't work nights. And so what we start to see is people who are bidding like really, really low amounts in really high end markets, they're getting leads at 2 a.m. maybe, but they're getting leads at 2 a.m. You probably weren't going to call that lead at 2 a.m. anyway, right? Just wait till 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. and then call the lead like a normal person would, or maybe shoot them a text through your automated drip, or send them to another company like a Call Porter or a Pat Live or something like that. Have them call them, set the appointment for when you wake up in the morning, that kind of thing. So we've seen that work really well for a lot of people. But there's pros and cons to both sides, right? The pro of a 9 to 5 is that it's a lot more stable. You can turn it off, you can turn it on. The pro of a never turn it off kind of thing is that you don't know when the lead's going to come in, but you're getting them for so much cheaper. And in my opinion, based on what I've seen, the title transfer to leads that come in overnight is much higher than leads that come in during the day.
Interesting. Higher quality leads. Do you think that has to do with just, how do you explain that? Seller motivations just higher in the evenings at nighttime? What do you think?
I would think so. I think the intent's got to be a lot higher. If you're drifting on your phone and you're filling out forms at 2 a.m, I think there's something there. And when we looked at it, we looked at the data respective to time zone, right? So we looked at, hey, this is the address. And so there's some variance there because someone who owns a house in Oregon could live in Ireland, or they could, it's not guaranteed, but if we look at houses in Oregon and they fill out the form at 2 a.m. PST versus, 2 p.m. PST, that title transfer rate is much higher at night than it is during the day, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's interesting. It kind of makes me think of like bidding on things back the day on eBay. Like I'd always be looking for the auctions that were ending at midnight. I'm talking like N64 games in the early 2000s of like, this one's ending at 2 a.m. I'm going to get a killer deal on this. It's the same type of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%.
Are there any sort of, what are some of the biggest questions you get, man, on people that haven't done PPL before? Because I like with any marketing method, it's like I'm going to shell out a few $100. They're nervous. They're wondering, even with refunds, like, is this going to take my time? Is it going to take my money? Is there anything you could add that might help kind of demystify some of the questions people have around PPL?
For sure. The biggest question we get is, well, what are your leads close at? How many leads am I going to have to buy to get a deal? And this is something we talked about before the call and stuff, but we've separated away from leads to deals, because leads to deals is really a reflection of how good is the marketing channel, plus how good is your sales process, excuse me,
Can you
plus
close, yeah.
how good is your cash conversion in the back end? Like, can you do an innovation deal? Can you do a wholesale deal? Can you turn it into a rental? Can you do every kind of real estate transaction under the sun? And I can't control your sales process, and I can't control if you can convert it into a deal or not. But what I can control is the marketing. And so what we aim for in our, internally, and I can't speak to every other company out there, but what we aim for internally is about 50% of the leads we send out after 6 months are transferring title. And so that gives you a 1 in 2 opportunity to make money. That does not mean I expect anybody to actually close 1 in 2. The best people we see are closing 1 in 3 or 1 in 4. The worst people are closing 1 in 30. You got to find your sweet spot depending on what kind of, how you convert the deal into cash in some form, or how your sales process works, et cetera. Does that help answer that question?
Yeah, it does. It does. Is there any confusion around bidding strategies, or like what's it like to bid on a lead?
Yeah, for sure. People, a big confusion piece is like, hey, I see the top bids 450 or 550 in this market. Do I really have to bid 450 or 550 to get leads, throughout the month? And generally the answer is no. You can usually bid a little bit lower, or sometimes a lot lower. The bid price is a reflection of who's bidding at the county at any given time. But some of those people are going to hit their budgets, by the 3rd, 4th day of the month. Some of those people hit their budgets by the 30th day of the month. So it does kind of depend. Generally, people who are really, a good example could be like a Tom Caffarello, who's a big, and he's a big carrot customer as well. Big guy in Boston. He can convert anything into cash. He's got a huge team, that kind of stuff. So he can spend whatever he wants on leads if you were to buy PPL, versus a guy who's in every single market. He doesn't know every single market like a local guy might, and so he needs to spend a lot less. He's just blanketing the whole country and stuff. So the lower down you go on the bid prices, typically the larger the budgets are, and then the higher the bid price, typically the smaller the budgets are, if that makes sense. Except for those like super niche type buyers.
Yeah, that makes sense, man. Yeah, I feel like that helps clarify it. You had mentioned before, maybe it was in your notes or before we kind of went live on the podcast, buying leads later in the month. So, there's off times during the day. You can bid on leads at night to get them for cheaper. Any specific time of the month? Is it just later in the month where you get leads for cheaper, and why?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely towards the end of the month you can start to get cheaper leads. It's often because people are hitting their budgets and stuff. We try to match how much marketing we do to how much budgets are available for people. We tend to go over, and so people tend to pick up some really cheap leads towards the end of the month. Internally, we have like a national program where you can buy leads. You're allowing the open geography of the system, and those guys will get from they'll start at the beginning of the month. They'll be getting like really rural stuff. By the end of the month, and they might even pick up a lead in Los Angeles for like $50, that kind of thing. So as the month goes on, as budgets start to get hit, the lead quality, or the quality of the geography of the leads will improve per price that you pay, if that makes sense.
So you're saying more leads available during those times?
There'll be more leads available at a lower price towards the end of the month. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes sense. Cool, man. Yeah. One question I have, this doesn't really matter, probably not valuable for people listening, but I'm just curious. do people be doing PPL leads think it's fun? I just keep thinking about like eBay back in the day, where like eBay is mostly like a bunch of garbage crap now. It's just buy it now items. But like eBay in its prime, it was like so fun and exciting to go in and be like, oh man, I'm gonna get a killer deal on this. Do you think it's fun? Do other people think it's fun, or just like, I just gotta get in, bid, try and get it cheap and bounce out?
It's funny. I think, I think when we first started, we were hoping that people would just kind of like set their bids, like what they're able to pay based on their market and stuff, and then they just never log in, except for like refunding leads and stuff. And I think what we found is people go in there a lot. They'll move their bids around to see if they can get up a little bit lower, and then they'll be like, "Oh, I didn't get any leads today. I got to move back up again." That kind of thing. So I think people do enjoy or do find themselves going in a lot. I'm not sure if enjoy is the right word, but they do find themselves going in a lot to change their bids around for better, for worse.
It's a little bit, yeah, no, it does make sense, because like there's a little bit of time cost there, but like it's that feeling of like, oh, I don't know if gamify is the right word, but I can just be active with it. My version of that with eBay was like, once I learned that you could snipe things automatically, I'm like, I'd stay on the eBay listing, and like back in the days of dial-up internet, I have to like put in the bid like 20 seconds before listing ended, and like try and get it, and then it was. And then there are like these auto sniping websites where like you plug in the eBay item ID and like your top bid, and bam, it's gonna snipe it for you right before the listing ended. It was so fun. I just love that, man. I just miss that. I just miss that nostalgia of eBay, but I don't know. I think it's kind of fun being able to bid on leads at different prices.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think we'll, as bids, we're gonna make some changes in our system, probably Q3 or Q4 of this year, and we might make it a little bit more adept so people can have a little bit more fun changing their bids and stuff. What I don't want to have happen is and this is my biggest concern, is people overspend on leads. And I think there's like an attraction doing it. There's a FOMO aspect where you're like, you're missing out on that lead. What if that was the one, that kind of thing. Although that's, great for short-term us, right? For the long-term relationship with that person, I think it's a bad thing, because if you end up overspending, you might not have any money left. And like, if you're not making money, then like, how is this going to work long term? So what I like to see people to do is, back into your numbers. Like if you know what your average, profit per deal is, what the average, amount of leads is to get a deal, et cetera, just back into what you could pay for leads. Ideally, don't pay even that amount, but don't pay more than that amount. And then, if it goes up from there, hey, just leave it. They'll eventually hit their budget. The leads will start rolling down to you as well. And the thing that we look at too is the more competition there is in accounting, the more lead requirements there are in accounting, like the more budget available. Like we're going to spend more marketing dollars in that county as soon as it's available. Like we're going right after it, because that's how we get paid. We get paid to produce really good leads. That's our job.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful, man. I have one more question for you before we wrap it up, and then head over to Q&A. Just since you work with a lot of higher level investors, people spend a lot of money on their marketing. Are there any things that stand out to you, man, as far as like certain KPIs or habits or things that some of the really successful investors are doing? Is there anything they're keeping track of, or is there anything that they're not doing that separates them from the solopreneur who's struggling?
Yeah, the winners are split testing their follow-up sequences. Yeah,
the winners are split testing their follow-up sequences. Just email, or elaborate?
Email and text. It's hard to split test phone calls. I don't think about that, but I have seen one or two people. I've seen one person try to correlate when is the recommended time that I should call this person based on when the lead came in. If that makes sense. So like, oh, they were at their computer at this time. This is the right time to call them again, that kind of thing, for the next follow-up days, et cetera. But I don't know how much that works, but definitely on the texting and emailing side, definitely split testing follow-up sequences. I think that's one of the biggest pieces.
Interesting.
It's like higher level.
I didn't see that one coming. Yeah, I thought you were going to give you something on KPIs, or yeah, that's interesting.
Oh,
well, shout out.
There's probably some sexy KPI out there.
Yeah, maybe, or maybe it's basics. Who knows? Shout out to investor fees. If you guys are looking to like set up drip campaigns, investor fees are a really easy way to do that. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, shoot, I think that's all I have. Is there anything else you wanted to add on PPL before we go into a little bit of Q&A here?
I think the only other thing that's coming around that's worth talking about is there's some FTC changes coming around January 1st. Some people are talking about it, some people are not. And the big change is that every time someone opts in on a pay-per-lead type site, they have to get 1-to-1 consent, which basically means that if, let's say you guys go to sellmyhousefast.com, or like a seller goes to sellmyhousefast.com and they fill out the form, they're going to have to specifically opt into you and say, I want to get an offer from that guy, right? And there's been a lot of concern in the past around lead exclusivity and making sure the leads are exclusive and that kind of stuff. And that's never something we've really dealt with, but other companies have dealt with that and stuff. And I think we'll see a real shakeup in the industry for some companies that have had a hard time maybe keeping real exclusivity or claiming their exclusivity and stuff like that, where there's going to be a lot of big boy FTC type fines. And then in addition to that, there are companies in the space that market leads as non-exclusive. They sell leads 10, 20, 30, 40, 100 times. And that's going to go away. Or it's going to become illegal.
Yeah.
It's not really up to me or the government whether it goes away, but it's definitely going to become illegal with some big fines coming down the pipe for those people. So we stay away from that stuff. We get a lead one time, we sell it one time. We don't do anything like that, but definitely coming down the pipe and something to note if you're working with companies that sell leads non-exclusively.
Yeah, thanks for calling that out. It's interesting. If you hear any changes about that, let us know. It'd be cool to keep our finger on the pulse of that. But yeah, everybody listening,
sure.
just play by the rules. Get consent. Do it the right way.
Yeah,
you don't want to pay for it later.
100%. 100%.
Well, anybody watching, listening, if you want to check out Property Leads, go to propertyleads.com/carrot. Also, check out the Carrot Marketplace, marketplace.carrot.com. We have another paper lead vendor, another paper lead vendor in there as well, Motivated Leads. Those guys do awesome work too. But we've got a whole bunch of different vendors in the Carrot Marketplace. Can help you out whether you're looking for lead gen, want to customize your site, etc. Check them out. And like Andy said, the pros are split testing their follow-up sequences. So use InvestorFreeze, use a good CRM, use whatever you need to split test your follow-up sequences as well, and take the time to always be testing. Like you said, the successful people are doing that. So I think it's a good tip, but that's all I got for this week, everybody. Thanks for listening. And if you like this, share with a friend and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts if you don't mind. And we'll see you next week, but we're going to bounce away for a second, come back for Q&A.